My name is Larry Cohen, and we are conducting this interview with Debbie Shankman as our videographer and Mr. Robert Anders. Mr. Anders is our neighbor living in Leisure World, a retirement community in Silver Spring, Maryland. Mr. Anders, we met about a month ago to discuss his background in World War II. We discussed the guidelines for the Library of Congress requirements. At that time, I also learned of his involvement in the Iranian turmoil in 1979, which led him to be a participant in Argo, the action, the book, and the movie. Born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on March 20th, 1925, his father was a partner in a small manufacturing plant which made heating and air conditioning components. He was born the prototypical American family, 2 sisters and himself, with a working dad and stay-at-home mom. Mr. Anders graduated high school and was drafted a few days later. I have found Robert Anders so knowledgeable with so many anecdotes, I just enjoyed listening for hours. When were you drafted?
I was drafted in, my birthday, 18th birthday was March 20th, 1943, when I signed up at the draft board, and then I graduated from high school like mid-June 43 and reported for duty shortly thereafter. I think it was June 30th. I had previously taken what was known as the Army Specialized Training Program exam, and those of us who took that exam were advised to not volunteer, but wait until you finish high school. And by that time, I had signed up with the draft board. So when I reported for duty, then I went to basic training down in Camp Hood, Texas, now Fort Hood. And we did regular sort of infantry basic training. That was about 3 months, and then our group was sent to school, taking engineering at North Texas State Teachers College, which is now North Texas University. So we entered the fall semester then in 43, and actually this program was abolished in the spring of 44. Apparently the Army decided they needed, they're making plans for the D-Day invasion, so they needed more troops to fill out the infantry division. So about March, April 44, then reported to Camp House up in northern Texas, and we joined the 103rd Infantry Division. That had previously been in training, and the officer and non-com cadre was the acting part of the division. Most of the previous members had been sent overseas as replacements to other units that are already in action. So our group of ASDP students sort of filled in the rest of the division. So we went to regular, additional infantry training, just sort of advanced from basic training, which we had done earlier. Fuel problems and lots of longer hikes, 25-mile hikes, and with full pack and that kind of thing. And so that we got into shape, they hoped, and we did. It was good, hard work, but I think that was up till that point, the best shape I'd ever been in my life. To back up a little bit, go back to Camp Hood. One of my first impressions there was, well, we were all just a bunch of, just young kids. Had been partying the last couple of weeks before we went into the service, and not in particularly good shape, but down at Camp Hood, they had a lot of German POWs, and these were all troops from the Africa Corps, and they were all in great shape, They were working the roads and areas like that throughout the camp, but that was sort of our first touch of what it was going to be like, getting into where the action was. And these German troops, like I said, they're from Africa. They were all tall and bronzed and in terrific shape. They're just working their roads around. They're just wearing their shorts and their little caps, So that was, I said, whoa, this is a serious business, what we're getting into. Anyway, to go back up to where we joined the 103rd Division, as I said, we went through the regular, pretty good training, and I remember one of the bits of training there was we took some training in glider landing. Well, there weren't real gliders, but they had mock-up gliders, and we just learning how to board the glider and how to get out, and that was fortunate that I never had to do that in combat, because the troops I know that did use the gliders, they had very high casualty rates. Anyway, so we in the fall of '44, about September or so, we boarded the troop trains to going to the East Coast. We went to Camp Shanks, New York, which was, I think, was about 25 or 30 miles outside of New York City. And we were there about a week, and that was, well, from my standpoint, it was an interesting experience and enjoyable experience, because I was an old jazz fan, and we had the chance to go into New York City, and at that time, 52nd Street was the heart of the real jazz performers. So I managed to get in a couple nights there, and I remember one particular night I saw and heard Billie Holiday, Coleman Hawkins, and Art Tatum. So anybody who knows anything about jazz, these are real top liners at that era. Anyway, so I also had a chance to, my closest buddy at that time was from New York City, so we had a chance to go and visit his family before we boarded the troop transport to go to Europe. That was a quite unpleasant experience, because it was pretty much rough weather, and we were, like we were down in the hole, I don't know, like 6 decks below the main deck, and we are in pretty crowded conditions. I think we were stacked up, I think, at least 4 men in a row, and then the bunks were connected to one another in a very small space between bunks, and we're all jammed into this space. We had 2 hours a day up on deck, and pretty rough weather. And we had 2 meals a day, and just standing in these long counters, and it was, as I said, again, rough weather. A lot of guys were getting sick, and so, and the boat was sort of, so it was pretty bouncy, up back and forth, up and down. And so if you're in this line, eating your breakfast or dinner, and the boat was going this way, and somebody's getting sick, and you're eating your dinner, probably somebody else's vomit was flow past you, so that was not too appetizing. Anyway, we got to Marseille, because we joined the 7th Army in southern France. D-Day in southern France was August 15th, so by the time we got there, it was September, approximately October 15th. And and by this time, the front line from southern France was up around mid-France, somewhere around Lyon or Dijon, in that area. Anyway, we took the old World War I type of 40 and 8 freight cars, and up to that area. And then we just boarded the train, and we went by truck up to the front line area, and we were getting. At this time, the front line was sort of static, and so we were getting prepared for really the first sort of pitched battle in that area and certainly the first pitched battle for our division. So we dug into the area, getting ready, preparing for the attack the next morning. This was about November 16th, as I recall, and we were dug in. It's a wooded area. I remember. I was in the headquarters platoon of our company. It's a regular rifle company. It's Company E of the 411th Regiment of the 103rd Division. Anyway, so I was dug in about 20 feet from our first sergeant, and as we during the night before we went into an attack, the Germans had shelled the area, and because they pretty much knew where we were going to start off from, and there's fairly heavy shelling. But then, as dawn broke, then we got prepared to take off, and I looked over and saw our first sergeant had been killed, and it was. So it was interesting to note. I mean, sometime later, in fact, a couple months ago, one of my sons, who is a real history buff, he had looked up and found the history of our regiment, including the day-to-day combat reports, everything, every single day from the time. So and he sent it to me on on the internet material, which I'm not very good. I'm practically illiterate on this kind of thing. But anyway, I was able to find on the information he sent me this history of our regiment, and I noticed it said on the first day of, it was kind of day by day, as I said, I was able to find our first day of combat, November 16th. And one of the things in the division and regiment history was that said the first man killed in the 411th Regiment was First Sergeant Ali Poindexter. so that was a very interesting and moving to learn and see that, because he was like, as I said, 20 feet away from me. Anyway, so we there was a number of casualties, of course, in that first day. As I said, it was a sort of a pitched battle, but from then on, the Germans were pretty much in retreat, and we were moving pretty fast, just trying to keep up with them. So maybe there'd be a little skirmish, light, sometimes heavier, maybe once every 3 days or so, and we'd be moving from they're moving from one little village mostly to the next, and we're right behind them. And sometimes, we'd catch up to them. There'd be a little skirmish, and we'd capture, quite a few prisoners. And but it was not real heavy combat like it was up in, people who landed up in northern France in the Normandy invasion. This was where we were, was sort of the southern flank of that. But we weren't in a lot of really serious, heavy combat until we got to the border. We're right near Strasbourg, north of Strasbourg, right on the Rhine River. We did not cross over the Rhine, but we crossed over the northern border of Alsace, up into what's German, the Palatine area in Germany. So we just crossed over into Germany. A day or two. That was around December 17th or 18th, and the Germans began. This was sort of the fringe of the Battle of the Bulge, and the Germans also started to resist in our area, started to push back. So that's I was wounded at that. On December 19th. We just moved into an area, again, this is in the Vosges Mountains, so it's heavily wooded area and quite hilly. The Vosges Mountains are not, that's like the Appalachian Mountains in this country, so, hilly, but not like the Rockies. And, anyway, we just moved into this area, and it was about mid-afternoon, and the Germans apparently were expecting us to stop in that area because they had just retreated from that area, and there were a lot of foxholes were already there. So we said, "Oh, this is not bad. Foxholes are already for us." But of course, that wasn't so smart anyway because the Germans expected us to come there. So. As soon as we sort of settled into that area, the next half hour or so, they threw in some artillery shells and mortar shells, and of course we all jumped into the various foxholes there, and I was hit probably the first or second round of artillery round there, but and of course in that kind of area, when the artillery shell hits the tree branches, then the shell will break downward, so it'll shrapnel and shell fragments will spread out and hit the ground that way, or hit the personnel that way. Which is, of course, if an artillery shell hits and lands on the ground, if you're right there, that's a direct hit. You're finished. But then it may not be many casualties right in that immediate area. But if it hits a tree, as I said, then the shell will break downward. Anyway, I was down in the hole with my buddy there, and I was down there, had my hand up next to my head like this, and this is where the shell came and hit my hand right here. So if I had moved a little bit one way or the other, then it probably hit me right in the side of the head there. Anyway, it was, I remember, I recall it, I felt like somebody hit me over there with a baseball bat, as hard as they could. And then it was kind of messy looking. The bones are sticking up and it's all bloody and so forth. But then after maybe 4 or 5 shells, and they stopped. And so I called a medic, and the medic came over and he put the sulfa powder on and wrapped it up, and he gave me a shot of morphine. And also my buddy in the same foxhole, he was hit in the leg, and so he took care of him too. But I was able to walk, so things were pretty quiet. So and the medic said, okay, the nearest little field hospital is down the road, and about whatever, a couple hundred yards or something. So I took off. There was another young fellow, was kind of a smaller guy, who was also hit at the same time. Not the one who was with me in the same foxhole, but also nearby. Anyway, the medic sent him with me but he was hit in the leg or something too. But he could walk. But he could walk very slowly. But I wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. As I said, he was a small guy, so I could pick him up and carry him on one shoulder, or my left shoulder, because my right hand was sort of wrapped up. But anyway, so we got down to the hospital there, and I remember I asked the doctor, I said, I'm going to lose my hand, and he sort of looked at it, sort of mumbled, I don't think so. Anyway, then just to back up a little, my buddy that was in the same foxhole with me, as I said, was hit on the leg. Just years later, about 5 years later, after the war was over and we were back home and everything, I kept in touch with him, and he sent me. He got a piece of the shell fragment that was in his leg, but it was the same shell that hit me. So he sent me a piece of that shell fragment, which I still have. Anyway, so I was in just a few days in that field hospital, and then we went to another kind of hospital. It was in a resort area in Vittel, France, and I was there for about a week, and that was a lot of the combat areas. It wasn't bad. I remember that's where I first started taking some kind of treatment, and I had this. Penicillin was new, fairly new at that time, and I remember I had a penicillin shot every 3 hours for 8 days. So there's a shot. Yeah, they didn't have tablets or pills in those days. Anyway, so I was in this place for maybe about a week, and then went on the train again to the hospital down in Marseille, near Marseille, and they did another operation, not an operation, but they did sort of a procedure where they put my hand in a brace and in a cast, and one of the things that I remember about that place is that by the time I left there, I was in Europe for about 4 months, and I remember telling somebody I was in Europe for 4 months, At that time, I had 4 showers, but 3 of which were in about the last week when I was in the hospital there. Anyway, then we boarded ship down at Marseille and went back to the States and went back to New York. One of the things I remember from that trip, was because I recalling much later, was I going past the Rock of Gibraltar, going from the Mediterranean into the Atlantic. Because to fast forward a bit, then I went back to the States, got out of the Army, went to school, got married, went to work, and eventually joined the Foreign Service. Went to the Foreign Service. My first tour was to Rangoon, Burma, which is about halfway around the world from Washington. And so when I finished that tour, I continued my westward travel by air from Rangoon to Rome, where I arranged to buy a car. I drove by car from from Rome to Genoa, and then I boarded ship from Genoa to New York. So then again, I passed the Rock of Gibraltar. This was about it was about 14 years from the time I first passed it going west. So I circumnavigated the globe in 14 years. And Magellan took 2. Of course, he was killed halfway around. But anyway, that's my story of my first time around the world. Anyway, so I got to New York and was on was sent to, I remember the hospital in New York, just there a couple of days. It was the first time I saw TV, so it was pretty primitive, but it was interesting to see. So I went by train then from New York to Vancouver, Washington. It was a long train ride, but yeah, it's interesting to see the whole country. That first time I hadn't done much traveling before I was in the Army. I mean, before I went into the Army, I had only been in, I think, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan. But anyway, this time I had a chance to see the whole country. So then I went to I was in the hospital in Vancouver, Washington, and they decided my wound was still healing, and they took a good look at it, and they said they would do some surgery on it, but they'd have to wait until it was all healed. So I had a 75-day furlough, which was wonderful because I went back to Milwaukee, and this was like in about May and June, July, so of 45, and of course I was like one of the first GIs back home. I mean, the war was just the war in Europe. VE Day was in May, and so I really got special treatment. I mean, I don't think I ever had bought a beer anywhere for the couple of months. I was 19, but in those days he said you could buy beer in public when you were 19. Anyway, so that was very enjoyable. To see my family and friends, but none of my friends who were in the service were back home yet. So I went back to the hospital then, and they did a graft, tendon graft on the 3 fingers of my hand. They took a tendon out of my wrist and cut it in 3 pieces and grafted it into these 3 fingers so I could get this full motion like that. And then I had another period of healing So I had a 45-day furlough then, and which was more of the same thing then. So this time I was home for I guess, well, I don't know. Anyway, it was a very enjoyable time. And so then I finally went back to the hospital then, and in about another week or so, or a couple of weeks maybe, I was discharged and went back and went to school right away. I entered the pre-med at Marquette University in Milwaukee. I had a couple of good friends from home who were actually in pre-med or in med school by this time, and I'd had this time almost a year in the hospital, and so I got used to I got to see what doctors did and what the hospital routine was like. So I was kind of interested in medicine, so I took this pre-med was okay with me. My mother and one of my friends registered me, and I had actually started a week late. So I was actually in pre-med for a couple of years until I ran into organic chemistry, and that changed my mind about medical school. I got interested in the foreign service, and I changed over. But one of my interesting experiences, and very pleasant experience in the hospital, was that, as I said, it was in Vancouver, Washington, which is across the river from Portland, Oregon. And just having this hand wound and everything else about me was fine. I was in good health and good shape. And so in the hospital, other than the time they performed the surgery on me, they just do the morning check. The doctor or nurse would come around, take your temperature, and that was free for the rest of the day. So I did a lot of local sightseeing and partying, and in Portland, and had a pretty good time, and because I was free almost every day, but so one day they informed us that we're going to have a special visitor, Rita Hayworth, the big movie star, and of course, especially at that time, that was quite the height of her career. And she was coming for a visit. She's going to go around, and she's going to stop in some of the wards and everything. So, well, if she's going to come to my ward, I'm not going to town today. So I stayed in the ward. And in fact, I remember I got back in bed and pulled the covers up, and sure enough, Rita came around and stopped at most of the bed. She stopped at my bed, sat down in my bed, and we were talking. And in fact, so she's a real stunner, a real beauty, and she's shorter than I thought she was. Anyway, that was a very pleasant conversation. But I told her, after getting to know her a little bit, I thought I could say this. I said, I have to have something to tell my buddy. So could you hold my hand for a couple of minutes? And she said, well, sure. So she did. So that was my big thrill being in the hospital at that time. So anyway, that's sort of about it. Sums up my military experience. As I said, I went to med school. I went to pre-med and then changed my mind to was interested in international affairs, and I transferred schools from Marquette out to Georgetown School of Foreign Service, where I graduated from Georgetown, and then eventually entered the Foreign Service.
You followed my notes perfectly. In your foreign, your foreign service experience that was word for word my notes. I don't know how you do that. I don't know remember what I had for breakfast. But everything that you said is exactly what you, it's amazing. The Foreign Service experience led to the involvement in Argo, which started with the taking of American Embassy on November 4th, 1979. That's certainly an interesting part of your personal history, for sure. It's an interesting part that everybody else, to everybody else. Would you like to just
Yeah,
talk
well,
about
yeah, well, okay, first of all, after the Army, as I went to school, and I worked for the Department of Labor for a couple of years. Then I took the Foreign Service exam, and I was in Foreign Service for 8 years, and then I was out for 10 years. I took care of some family situation and so forth. Then I came back in the Foreign Service. First, I came back in the Civil Service in the State Department, and then they had this program where you could transfer to Foreign Service. So I said, yeah, I'd like to get back into the Foreign Service. I'd like to serve overseas again. I had a nice job. I was in the Public Affairs Office in the Department of State, but I wanted to go overseas, so they said, okay, we have, you can come back in Foreign Service. There's an opening here in Tehran. This was 1979. Early 1979. Things were a little dicey in Tehran at that time, but I said, oh, okay, that should be pretty interesting, exciting place. And I was planning to bring my family too. So I took a little more training and area familiarization, and things meanwhile were getting worse in Tehran at the time. So by the time I went, finally, they said, no, you can't take your family anymore. So I went, well, just by myself. Anyway, so as everyone knows, I mean, I got there before, actually, I got there after the Shah had left. So Khomeini and the new regime were in charge. Things were still pretty rough. I mean, there was street fighting every day among the different revolutionary groups, but there's strong anti-American demonstrations, which became much stronger after the Shah was admitted to the U.S. And then at that time, the demonstrations became much larger and more and louder and bordering on being violent. But there was a demonstration almost every day. Anyway, one day, November 4th or 8th, I can't remember this stuff anymore. It was the demonstrators came over the walls and started occupying the whole embassy. I was in the consular section. Our building was up against the back wall of the embassy. So people in the front buildings, in the main building of the embassy, called and said, hey, the demonstrators are coming in, you better lock up, which we did right away. Anyway, so then eventually the demonstrators were trying to break into our building, and they built, somebody smelled smoke, and we figured they'd build a fire on our roof. So we said, we've got to try and get out of here. We could not go back into the main part of the compound, it's full of demonstrators, but we did have an exit out into a back street. And so I think one of our Marine Guard in our building went down to take a look out in the back street, and that was clear. So we said, okay, we've got to make a break for it. There were about 60, 70 people in the building at the time, about 30 people, visitors, Iranians looking for visas, and Americans who were trying to get their passports up to date to get out of the country. And so we sent all the visitors out first, then about 20 Iranian staff employees were sent out, and then there were about 10 Americans. We were the last ones to go out. I was at number 2 in the consular section, so the consul general and I were the last two people to go out, and we split into two groups, each one going with the other 4 or 5 Americans in each group. The Consul Generalist group, they were captured within a few minutes. Our group managed to get away. And we were hiding here and there for the first 2 or 3 days, and then finally we were at a loss to where the best place to hide. Where should we do? What should we do? And I called I said, this is we're up against the wall. So luckily I brought my local phone number pocketbook with me, and I called my Canadian friend and said, hey, what's happening? Can you help us or something? And he says, sure, come on over here. You can stay with us. And I said, yeah, well, I've got 4 other people with me. And he said, that's okay. You can bring them all. So we managed to arrange transportation through our comrades in the British Embassy. And they brought us over to the Canadians. And for up to almost 3 months then, we were staying with Canadian friends. There were 4 of us with my friend, John Sheardown, and the 2 of our group were with the ambassador. Actually, and this is where the movie Argo starts, really, when we're already with the Canadians. When, in our minds, the worst part was those 3 or 4 days before we made contact with the Canadians. Once we were with the Canadians, our day-to-day lives were quite normal, good, without events, without hardship. We had plenty to eat and drink. We played games most of the day. We played bridge, Monopoly, Scrabble. I read 27 books in that period. John Sheardown had a great library, but one of our other fellows in the group, Mark Lejic, he doubled that number. He read over 50 books. Anyway, our day-to-day lives were quite comfortable. But we were getting anxious about what was going to happen to us. So we sent a message to the Department of State through the Canadians, saying, do you have any instructions for us? What's happening? What we're going to do? Because we were we had to try to maintain some kind of humor, have a light way of looking at things. Like I remember joking one day, we were saying, "What's the department going to do when we get back? Are they going to? We're having a rather nice, pleasant time here. And I have to worry in the back of our minds. We might get caught, but otherwise, as I said, playing games and relaxing. I said, what's the department going to do? Charge us for annual leave for all the time that we're here? And we thought, well, no. On the other hand, we're on 24/7 duty here. We're on the alert, so we should put in for overtime. But anyway, so we try to keep sense of humor about the whole thing, if possible. Anyway, so we got a message that someone is coming to tell you about exfiltration. Sure enough, in a couple of days, 2 CIA agents came, told us about their escape plan. There were 3 plans. A couple of plans were very dicey. They were sort of incomplete, very vague. We didn't like those 2 plans. But the plan that they were really trying to sell, which we bought, was that we were a Canadian film company, and we were in Iran looking for some location, for a movie, and they they went into great detail in backing up this plan. They had, for example, they had one of our group was a script writer, so they sent us a complete movie script. They showed us they put ads in the big showbiz papers, like
Variety.
yeah.
Was variety.
Yeah, and they showed us the ads, and this was real. And we had, of course, Canadian passports. We had Canadian business cards, Canadian driver's license, and they gave us a complete biography to learn. Like if we were going to be Canadians, if we were stopped and interrogated, we'd have to have a story. So, like I was born in Ottawa. I went to university in Montreal, and so we had to learn a new identity. And of course, we had like a business card, and they actually, if I gave them my card, it had my name, of course, a different name, Robert Baker, but and I was a location manager. I was on the Robert as location manager, but they had a Hollywood phone number and address. If I gave somebody that card and they called that number, there was somebody in Hollywood answer the phone, and they could say that Robert Baker was, I believe he's in Iran right now, So they just had this complete detailed backup. And then we had to, they said, I want to do this as soon as possible. So they were just there 2 days, and then we went through a little practice about going through immigration customs at the airport, and with our new identity, and so we learned that. I know one of the things that we did there was that, because we didn't have any luggage or clothing, they got just clothes on our backs, but so it looked like real travelers. The Canadians gave us some some luggage and clothing, So one of the things the Canadians gave me was a shirt that was about 2 sizes too small, and I could button it up to about here, and then it's open like this. I have sort of a hairy chest, and I had my hair was, I hadn't had a haircut for about 3 months, and I was thinking about this Tony, the CIA guy, Tony Mendez. He said, you have to take on a new identity. You're somebody else. You have to be somebody else. So I'm sitting here, and I thought, well, let's see, where these Hollywood people. And I thought, yeah, maybe. So I had a chain, a medallion. I'd wear that, and I'd wear this shirt. I had long hair. I hadn't had a haircut for 3 months, and so I got, I'll be some sort of my idea of a Hollywood movie dude or something, and so that was my role. The other guys were really laughing at me, but again, this injecting a little humor into the thing. It was helpful, to me anyway. Yeah. And it's funny because even Tony wrote the book Argo, and in there at one point he says the night before, he's reviewing everything, and he says in the book, he says, well, I hope Bob doesn't get carried away too much in his role. So he seemed to, I was really enjoying it. Anyway, actually, the airport thing and the whole experience went off very smoothly. The movie was much more exciting than the real thing.
Yeah, they made it look like somebody wanted to back out.
Yeah, but of course, we saw the movie. My wife and I went to with the others went to the premiere in Hollywood. We met all the big shots there. Ben Affleck and George, what's his name? George
Clooney.
George Clooney. He's not in the movie, but he was the principal producer. So we partied with all these people. So that was great fun. So, and all the other things, not all the other things, but a lot of the other things. Of course, the airplane chase at the end, that was obviously fiction. But all the other things like the getting the ticket again at the last minute, or at the airport, and they said your name didn't show up. Well, they didn't even have that kind of equipment in those days. So I mean, that ticket, there's no problem with the ticket. That all went smoothly. And there's one of our guys, Lee Schatz. They took another look at him because he looked a little different in the photo in his passport. I guess mustache was a little longer, and then so that was the only little hiccup really. Well, there's another little worse one. They did. Well, this was not in the movie, but they we had 4 tickets, four different airlines, and the first one was on British Airways, I think, and the second, the one we actually used was on Swiss Air. But so we were in the waiting room, and the British Airways flight was before us. They would call the people to go out to aboard the plane. So all those people left the waiting room lounge. As soon as all those people were gone, the Swiss Air flight was coming up. The next one, the announcement came up on and said the Swiss Air flight is going to be delayed because of some kind of a technical problem. But we delayed about 4 hours. So we thought, maybe we should have taken that British flight. And then we thought, maybe can we run to catch it now? And said, no, that would attract too much attention. We better just sit tight and wait for the Swiss Air flight. Then they did announce, okay, it's only going to be a half-hour wait. So we boarded that flight, and that was okay. But one thing that was interesting about, then we boarded the flight. Now, Swiss Air, they named their planes after different cities and cantons, provinces in Switzerland. And we're about to board the plane. You take a little bus out to the tarmac to board the plane, and about to do that. And I look up at the plane. The name of the plane is Argo, with a slightly different spelling, like Argau.
Oh.
And so I was with Tony at the time, and I poked us. Hey, you guys, you CIA guys, you think of everything, don't you? So then we boarded, took off, okay, and we crossed the border into Turkey, which meant we were in the clear then because we weren't going to be forced to turn around and go back. So that just like in the movie, that was accurate on this, is that we now crossed the border into Turkey, and the bar is now open, and so we said we all ordered a drink, and Argo, yeah, and that was how that one turned out.
You, in the service, you were awarded the Purple Heart, Bronze Star, 20 years later, Combat Infantry Badge. Those were, awarded to you for,
Well, yeah, maybe it's sort of standard.
Well,
standard
well, no,
procedure for infantrymen.
for people who go and put their life on the line. I mean,
Yeah.
The point is, did you feel like that helped? I mean, that prepared you in any way for your life? What coming up later in life?
Well, yeah, I think so, because I think one thing it probably helped in the Tehran experience, because I had, like the other people in our little group who escaped. I mean, that was the first foreign tour for all those people, and I'd had the previous foreign tours, to some places like in Rangoon and Manila, both places which had occasional fairly heavy demonstrations and protests, so which was some preparation, but also have the experience of infantry combat. I mean, I was, had the experience of somebody shooting at me, so which helped in Tehran, so okay, it's cool, calm down, because the two in our group there were two married couples, and those guys, they really had it tough. I mean, I know the two fellas. I mean, they told their young wives, oh, we're going to join the foreign service. It's going to be great fun and exciting. We'll see the world. And here they are on their first tour. They run into this Tehran thing. So I didn't have that problem. I mean, they sort of, I think, considered me to be some help. And I remember one of these places we were hiding. Mark Lejic was describing how everybody felt and what was happening, and they were all nervous and scared. And he said, they said, "Oh, I think Bob is sleeping." So anyway, so I think my previous kind of experience helps there.
Do you have any message that you'd like to leave for the future?
Oh, well, I don't want to give a lengthy speech or anything.
No.
Whatever
you'd like to say. You have the stage.
Yeah, I just feel, I mean, as far as serving our country in the military and in the foreign service, I think it's important that we stay strong militarily, not aggressive, but have a good defense. And also at the same time, keep our communications open. Don't be afraid to, in fact, we want to encourage our people to talk to everybody else in the world. So the more we're able to do that and to understand one another, I mean, our allies and our adversaries. I mean, it's important to know where they're coming from, and it's important for that they know where we're coming from. So those are my two things I would say. Be prepared, but be open.